I was standing in the CFO's office, my resignation letter crisp in my hand, watching Preston unravel in real time through the glass conference room walls, when I realized something profound. Revenge isn't about screaming. It's about strategic silence. It's about knowing exactly when to let the bomb you've been building detonate while you're already halfway out the door. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to where this really started, because every woman who's ever been underestimated, underpaid, and told to smile through it will understand exactly how I got here. My name is Tessa. Not Tessa the pushover, not Tessa the team player, not Tessa who'll stay late again without overtime. Just Tessa. And this is the story of how I dismantled a corporate empire with nothing but a filing system, an encrypted email account, and the kind of patience that only comes from years of being professionally gaslit. It started on a Tuesday. Tuesdays are the cruelest days in corporate America, don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Mondays you're still riding the weekend denial. Wednesdays you found your rhythm. But Tuesdays? Tuesdays are when the bullshit really sets in. I was in my cubicle at Meridian Solutions, a mid-sized consulting firm that specialized in making rich people richer while telling the rest of us we were family. I'd been there 9 years. 9 years of watching men with half my experience get promoted. 9 years of fixing other people's mistakes and watching them take credit. 9 years of being called detail-oriented when they meant she'll do the work nobody else wants. I wasn't special. That's what made this whole thing so perfect. I was invisible in the exact way that middle-aged women become invisible in corporate spaces. Not old enough to be respected for wisdom, not young enough to be noticed for anything else. Just there. Competent. Reliable. Forgettable. The kind of woman who processes expense reports and knows where every financial body is buried because someone has to do the actual work while the executives play golf and talk about synergy. Preston Caldwell III walked into Meridian like he owned it. Technically, his father owned about 40% of it, which in nepotism math equals 100%. He was 29, fresh from an MBA program that cost more than my house, with that particular brand of confidence that comes from never facing a single consequence in your entire life. Crisp suits. Expensive watch. Hair that looked like he paid someone to make it look carelessly perfect. And that smile. God, that smile. The kind that said, I know I'm bulletproof, and you know it too. They announced him as our new VP of Strategic Operations. I watched from my desk as he shook hands with the leadership team, everyone laughing just a little too hard at his jokes, everyone standing just a little too straight in his presence. I'd seen this movie before. The golden boy arrives, makes sweeping changes that sound impressive in presentations but create chaos in practice, takes credit for anything good, blames underlings for anything bad, and eventually either gets promoted or leaves for something better while the rest of us clean up the mess. I thought I could ride it out. I'd survived worse. But what I didn't know then was that Preston wasn't just incompetent. He was malicious. And he'd somehow decided that I, quiet little Tessa who just wanted to do her job and go home to her cat, was a threat. The first few months were small things. He'd ask me to compile reports, then present them as his own work in meetings without acknowledgement. He'd change processes I'd spent years refining, creating inefficiencies that I'd then have to fix quietly while he took credit for streamlining operations. Once, he asked me to explain our entire financial tracking system to him, took notes for an hour, then presented my explanation verbatim to the board as his efficiency audit findings. I didn't complain. That's what women do, right? We absorb it. We tell ourselves it's not worth making waves. We convince ourselves that someone will eventually notice our work, our value, our contributions. We wait for fairness like it's a bus that's just running late instead of a route that got cancelled years ago. But then came the jokes. Little comments in meetings. Tessa's a little rigid about processes, but that's just her generation. Don't mind Tessa, she's protective of her systems, you know how some women get territorial. And my personal favorite, delivered with that charming smile during a team lunch, Tessa's brilliant with numbers, probably because she doesn't have much else going on outside work, right, Tessa? Everyone laughed. The kind of uncomfortable laugh that means everyone knows it's inappropriate but nobody wants to be the one to call it out. I smiled. Took a sip of water. Said nothing. Because what do you say? If you defend yourself, you're sensitive. If you call it sexist, you're difficult. If you laugh along, you're complicit in your own diminishment. So you smile, and you file it away in that mental folder every woman keeps, evidence that will never be used because speaking up is somehow more dangerous than staying silent. The comments got worse over time. In a quarterly review meeting, Preston suggested that maybe I'd be happier in a less demanding role, something with fewer responsibilities. When I pushed back on a vendor contract that had obvious red flags, he told the room I was stuck in my ways and resistant to innovation. Once, during a presentation I'd spent weeks preparing, he interrupted me halfway through to say, "Let me simplify this for everyone," and then proceeded to botch my own analysis while the leadership team nodded along like he was some kind of prophet. I started having trouble sleeping. You know that feeling when you wake up at 3 a.m. with your heart racing, replaying every interaction, wondering if maybe you really are the problem? When you start second-guessing your own expertise because you've been told so many times that you're wrong, even when you know you're right. That was me. Every night. Staring at the ceiling. Wondering how I'd gone from confident professional to someone who felt anxious every time she opened her mouth in a meeting. My friends told me to quit. My sister said I should report him to HR. My therapist, who I'd started seeing because the stress was literally making me sick, suggested I explore other opportunities. But here's what nobody understands unless they've lived it: leaving feels like losing. Staying feels like dying. And reporting it? That's just career suicide with extra steps. Then he started making mistakes. Big ones. Financial mistakes. Approving expenditures that didn't match budget codes. Routing payments through vendors that didn't quite exist. Bonuses to consultants whose LinkedIn profiles were 3 weeks old and listed their skills as entrepreneurship and crypto enthusiasm. I noticed because noticing is my job. I flag these things. I send polite emails. Hi Preston, just wanted to check if Project Avalanche is supposed to be coded under R&D or marketing? The vendor invoice doesn't match our approved list. Let me know. He'd respond with something vague. All good, Tessa. Just trust the process. Or he'd ignore it entirely. And the thing is, in corporate America, when someone senior tells you it's handled, you're supposed to let it go. Asking twice makes you a nag. Asking 3 times makes you insubordinate. But I couldn't let it go. Not because I'm some corporate hero, but because I'm good at my job. And watching someone systematically dismantle financial controls I'd spent years building made me physically ill. So I started keeping my own records. Printing emails. Saving attachments. Creating a shadow filing system in a locked drawer at my desk. At first, it was just for my own peace of mind, proof that I wasn't crazy, that the numbers really didn't add up. But then it became something else. It became insurance. I started noticing patterns. Every Friday afternoon, after most people had left, Preston would approve a batch of expenses. Always under the $50,000 threshold that required CFO sign-off. Always to the same rotation of 5 or 6 vendors. I pulled up the vendor registration forms. 3 of them had been registered within the same week, all listing the same business address, a UPS store in a strip mall 2 states away. I dug deeper, which meant staying late, which meant lying to my cat about why her dinner was delayed. The consultants receiving bonuses? 2 of them had social media profiles that showed them on vacation during the exact weeks they were supposedly providing critical strategic services. One of them was Preston's former roommate from business school. Another was dating his cousin. I found photos. I took screenshots. I documented everything with the kind of meticulous attention to detail that had gotten me labeled obsessive in performance reviews. The invoices were the smoking gun. Same services, billed twice, with slightly different descriptions. Strategic market analysis and market strategy consultation for the same project, same month, same amount, $35,000 each. When I cross-referenced the payment dates with our bank records, both payments had gone through. That was $70,000 for work that either happened once or never happened at all. I started carrying a flash drive in my purse. Every night, I'd update my shadow archive. By month 3 of Preston's reign, I had a folder structure that would make a forensic accountant weep with joy: duplicate payments, unauthorized bonuses, vendor fraud, expense manipulation, timestamp irregularities. Each folder had subfolders. Each subfolder had documents cross-referenced with dates, amounts, and the company policies being violated. But I didn't do anything with it. Because what was I supposed to do? Go to HR? HR's job isn't to protect employees. It's to protect the company from employees. And Preston's daddy owned 40% of the company. Simple math, my documentation versus nepotism and millions of dollars in investment capital. I'd be the one escorted out by security while Preston got a stern talking to behind closed doors. So I waited. And I kept documenting. And I told myself that maybe, someday, this information would matter. That maybe there would come a moment when having proof would make a difference. I just didn't know that moment would be forced on me in the most humiliating way possible. The hammer dropped on a Thursday afternoon, because apparently that's when they deliver career-ending news. Far enough from Monday that you can't claim it's a fresh week mistake. Close enough to Friday that you have the weekend to fall apart in private. Perfect timing. I was called into HR. Not just HR, but the big conference room, the one with the floor-to-ceiling windows that made you feel like you were in an aquarium being studied by predators. Marlene was there, the HR director, with her sympathetic head tilt and her voice that sounded like she was explaining euthanasia to a golden retriever. And Preston. Of course Preston was there. Sitting at the head of the table like he was chairing a board meeting, not participating in my professional execution. Tessa, thank you for making time, Marlene began, as if I'd had a choice. We need to discuss some concerns that have been brought to our attention regarding your recent performance and, frankly, your attitude in the workplace. My attitude. 9 years. Never late, never a complaint, never a single disciplinary action. My attitude. Preston leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled, expression schooled into something he probably thought looked professional but actually looked like a kid who'd just tattled and was waiting for the teacher to dole out punishment. Tessa, I want to start by saying I've tried to be patient. I know change is hard. But we've received multiple reports that you've been resistant to the new operational directions. Your questioning of decisions, your skepticism in meetings, it's creating tension. It's undermining team morale. I stared at him. I asked clarifying questions about budget discrepancies. That's literally my job description. Marlene jumped in, her voice dripping with false empathy. We understand that you're used to a certain way of doing things, Tessa. And your institutional knowledge is valuable. But Preston has brought fresh perspective and innovative approaches, and we need everyone to be team players. Your recent behavior, the challenging, the constant questions, even your tone in emails, it's creating what several people have described as a hostile work environment. Hostile. I was creating hostility by asking why we were paying $45,000 to a consulting firm that operated out of a P.O. box. By questioning why the same service was being invoiced twice. By doing my actual job. Furthermore, Preston added, pulling out a printed email, my email, with certain phrases highlighted in yellow like evidence at a crime scene, this kind of communication is exactly what we're talking about. When I proposed the vendor consolidation initiative, you responded with, and I quote, this approach contradicts our established procurement protocols and exposes us to significant financial risk. That's not collaborative. That's adversarial. It was also accurate, I said quietly. That vendor relationship cost us $80,000 in duplicate services. That's your interpretation, he shot back. And this is exactly the problem. You assume your way is the only right way. You don't trust anyone else's judgment. Marlene pulled out a folder. A whole folder. About me. We've been documenting these incidents, Tessa. The pattern is concerning. So here's what we've decided. She slid a paper across the table. We're implementing a performance improvement plan. This is a 90-day structured program where we'll work together to address these behavioral concerns. My hand stayed in my lap. I didn't reach for the paper. And during this improvement period, Preston said, and I swear to God he smiled, actually smiled, we'll need to adjust your compensation to reflect the, let's say, recalibration of your role responsibilities. A 15% reduction, effective immediately. Once you successfully complete the PIP and demonstrate you're aligned with our company values and collaborative culture, we can revisit your compensation. 15%. They were cutting my pay by 15%. For doing my job. For asking questions. For existing as a woman who didn't worship at the altar of Preston's mediocrity. The room felt airless. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears. 15% of my salary was my car payment. My therapy. My savings contribution. My tiny sliver of financial security in a world that had taught me that women's security is always conditional, always temporary, always one man's mood away from disappearing. Additionally, Marlene continued, voice softening like that made it better, we'll need you to issue a formal apology to the team for any discomfort or tension your behavior has caused. We're thinking a brief statement at Monday's all-staff meeting would be appropriate. Something acknowledging the impact of your resistance to change and your commitment to moving forward as a team player. They wanted me to apologize. To stand in front of my colleagues, people who'd seen me work my ass off for 9 years, and apologize for having standards. For doing my job with integrity. For not letting a mediocre man with a trust fund destroy the financial controls that kept this company functional. I sat there. Hands folded. Face neutral. Every cell in my body screaming. But I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. Because somewhere in that moment, something inside me crystallized. Got very cold. Very clear. I understand, I said quietly. They looked almost surprised. Preston's smile widened. Marlene's shoulders relaxed slightly. I'm glad we could resolve this professionally, Tessa. We really do value your contributions. This is just about growth and adaptation. I stood up. Smoothed my skirt. Picked up my notepad. Is there anything else? Just review the PIP documents and sign by tomorrow, Marlene said. And we'll need your talking points for Monday's apology by Friday so we can review them. They wanted to pre-approve my humiliation. Wordsmith my degradation. Make sure I debased myself in exactly the right way. Of course, I said. And I walked out. I made it to my desk. Sat down. Opened my bottom drawer where I kept emergency chocolate, hand lotion, and a small locked file box I'd purchased 3 months earlier when Preston's financial irregularities had first started registering as a pattern. Inside that box was everything. Every printed email. Every invoice. Every duplicate payment. Every ghost vendor. Every unauthorized bonus. Every single piece of evidence I'd been collecting, organized, cross-referenced, damning. And in that moment, I realized something. I hadn't been collecting this information as a security blanket. I'd been building a weapon. I just hadn't known when I'd need to use it. Now I knew. I opened my laptop. Composed a brief email to myself with the subject line timeline. Then I started planning. Not emotionally. Not frantically. Methodically. Because revenge, real revenge, the kind that actually works, isn't hot. It's cold. It's strategic. It's patient. That night, I didn't go home and rage cry into a bottle of wine. I didn't call my sister to vent. I didn't post vague things on social media about toxic workplaces. I went to a coffee shop in the next town over, one with public Wi-Fi and no security cameras pointed at the seating area. I created an encrypted email account through Proton Mail, designed for whistleblowers and journalists. Username, Concerned Meridian 2024. No identifying information. No personal details. Just a generic account that could belong to anyone in the company. Then I began the real work. I uploaded every document to a secure Swiss-based cloud platform that specialized in anonymous document sharing. I organized everything into folders: financial irregularities, unauthorized expenditures, vendor fraud, bonus manipulation, retaliation evidence. That last folder was new. I added every email from the HR meeting. Every highlighted phrase. Every documented incident of my supposed hostility. I added my performance reviews from the past 9 years, all excellent, all glowing, showing a clear pattern of exemplary work right up until Preston arrived. I wrote a cover memo. Clinical. Professional. Unemotional. To whom it may concern, the following documentation reveals systematic financial fraud and HR violations at Meridian Solutions, including unauthorized expenditures totaling approximately $380,000, vendor fraud, bonus manipulation, and retaliatory actions against an employee who raised concerns about these activities. All documents are authentic and can be verified through company records. This matter requires immediate investigation. Then I researched. Found the email addresses for our external auditors. The board's compliance committee. The CFO. And, just for insurance, 2 financial journalists who specialized in corporate fraud and had published recent exposés about nepotism in consulting firms. But I didn't send it. Not yet. Because timing is everything. You don't detonate a bomb when people are looking at you. You wait until they're convinced you're defeated. Until they think they've won. Until they've moved on and stopped paying attention. I needed them to believe I was broken. That weekend was the longest of my life. I barely slept. When I did, I had stress dreams about showing up to the office naked, about standing in front of the company stammering through an apology while Preston smiled. I'd wake up with my heart racing, sheets soaked with sweat, Kat staring at me like I'd lost my mind. Maybe I had. Maybe this whole plan was insane. Maybe I should just quit, take the unemployment, find another job and pretend none of this ever happened. That's what they wanted. That's what women are supposed to do. Disappear quietly. Make it easy for everyone. But every time I thought about backing down, I remembered Preston's smile. That smug, satisfied smile when he told me they were cutting my pay. And I remembered Marlene asking me to pre-approve my own humiliation. And I remembered 9 years of working my ass off just to be treated like I was the problem. No. I wasn't backing down. I was burning it down. Monday morning, I came in early. Before anyone else. Made coffee in the break room. Checked my email. Smiled at the security guard. Everything normal. Everything fine. Just Tessa, same as always. The all-staff meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m. At 9:45, Marlene stopped by my desk. Ready for this morning, Tessa? Do you have your talking points? I looked up. Smiled softly. I'd been thinking about what to say. She looked relieved. Good. This is an important step. Fresh start and all that. Absolutely, I said. 9:55 a.m. People started filtering into the main conference room. The big one. The all-hands room with the projection screen and the microphone and the chairs arranged in neat rows like an auditorium. I watched from my desk as the room filled. Saw Preston walk in, coffee in hand, chatting with someone from sales. Saw Marlene setting up her laptop at the front. 9:58 a.m. My phone buzzed. Text from Marlene, where are you? Meeting starts in 2 minutes. I didn't respond. 10 a.m. Another text, Tessa? Everyone's waiting. I stayed at my desk. Opened a spreadsheet. Started reviewing a vendor invoice. Perfectly calm. Perfectly busy. 10:03 a.m. My desk phone rang. I didn't answer. 10:05 a.m. Preston himself appeared at my cubicle. Face red. Jaw tight. The meeting started 5 minutes ago. What are you doing? I looked up. Met his eyes. Working. You're supposed to be addressing the team. We discussed this. No, I said calmly. You dictated terms. I said I understood. I never said I agreed. His eyes widened. This is insubordination. You're already on a PIP. You're seriously going to make this worse? I'm not making anything worse, Preston. I'm simply not participating in my own humiliation. You don't have a choice, I do, actually. And I'm choosing not to attend. You should get back to your meeting. He stood there for a moment, visibly struggling with how to respond. Then he turned and stormed back to the conference room. I watched through the glass walls as he leaned down and whispered something to Marlene. Watched her face go pale. Watched her look toward my desk. I gave her a small wave. The meeting continued without me. I could see Preston addressing the room, probably spinning some narrative about my absence. Probably painting me as even more difficult, more resistant, more problematic. Perfect. Let him dig the hole deeper. At 10:18 a.m., from a public library computer I'd visited during what I'd told my neighbor was a personal errand, the emails went out. Subject: Urgent compliance investigation required, Meridian Solutions financial irregularities body, see attached documentation regarding systematic financial fraud and retaliation at Meridian Solutions. Immediate investigation warranted. Attachments: 52 documents. Every invoice. Every email. Every bank record. Every timeline. Every piece of evidence, organized into those neat folders, each file labeled with clinical precision. Recipients: external auditors. Board Compliance Committee. CFO. And yes, those two journalists. I hit send. Closed the browser. Cleared the history. Walked out of the library and went back to work. The rest of Monday was quiet. Too quiet. That eerie silence before a storm when the air pressure drops and the birds stop singing. I processed invoices. Responded to routine emails. Ate my lunch at my desk. Nobody said anything about the meeting. Nobody mentioned my absence. It was like everyone was holding their breath. Tuesday started differently. I noticed it the moment I walked in. The energy had shifted. Conversation stopped when I passed. People avoided eye contact. The receptionist, usually bubbly, gave me a weird, tight smile. At 9:15 a.m., 2 people I didn't recognize arrived. Business casual. Serious faces. Laptop bags. They signed in with security and were immediately escorted to the executive suite. At 10:30 a.m., 3 more arrived. These ones I recognized, our external auditing firm. I'd worked with them during our annual reviews. They did not look happy. By 11 a.m., Preston's office door was closed. Through the glass walls, I could see 4 people inside with him. Legal pads out. Expressions grim. Preston's face was pale. His usual swagger completely absent. At 11:47 a.m., IT showed up on the executive floor. Not the regular help desk guys. The forensic IT specialists. The ones who get called when there's suspected fraud or data breaches. They started with Preston's computer. Lunchtime was chaos barely contained in professional packaging. The Whisper network was on fire. Did you hear? Someone filed a complaint. Federal investigation. Auditors are pulling financial records. Nobody knew details. Everyone knew something big was happening. I ate my sandwich. Drank my water. Kept my face neutral. At 2:47 p.m., company-wide email from the CFO, due to a routine compliance review, All employees are asked to preserve any and all financial communications and documentation. Further instructions to follow. Routine. Right. At 3:30 p.m., Marlene walked past my desk. She didn't stop. Didn't make eye contact. But her face was ashen. Her usual put-together appearance crumbling at the edges. At 4:15 p.m., Preston emerged from his office. No laptop bag. No briefcase. Hands empty. He walked to the elevator flanked by two people I didn't recognize. Security? Legal? Didn't matter. What mattered was his face. The entitled smugness completely gone. Replaced by shock. Fear. The dawning realization that Daddy's money might not be enough this time. He didn't look at me. Didn't look at anyone. Just stared straight ahead as the elevator doors closed. Wednesday was worse. Or better, depending on your perspective. I arrived to find the executive suite completely locked down. Badge access restricted. The external auditors had taken over 2 conference rooms. IT had set up what looked like a forensic workstation in one of the empty offices. At 9:07 a.m., company-wide email, Preston Caldwell has been placed on administrative leave pending an internal investigation. All inquiries should be directed to legal counsel. The office erupted. Not loud chaos, but that buzzing, vibrating energy of people trying to look professional while frantically texting and whispering. Someone from accounting actually gasped. 2 people from sales immediately started updating their LinkedIn profiles, the universal sign that a company is sinking. I kept working. Processed payroll. Reviewed expense reports. Business as usual. At 10:30 a.m., Marlene requested a meeting with me. Her office this time, not the big conference room. She looked like she'd aged 5 years in 3 days. Makeup not quite hiding the dark circles. Hair pulled back so tight it looked painful. Hands shaking slightly as she gestured to the chair across from her desk. Tessa. Thank you for making time. I sat. Said nothing. She took a breath. I need to discuss last week's conversation. The performance improvement plan and the salary adjustment. What about it? We're reversing both actions. Effective immediately. The PIP is being withdrawn from your file. Your salary is being restored to its full amount, plus back pay for the period the reduction was in effect. I waited. And, she continued, voice strained, the company would like to extend our sincere apologies for any miscommunication or misunderstanding regarding your performance. You're a valued member of this organization. Your dedication and integrity have not gone unnoticed. The words sounded rehearsed. Probably because legal had written them. Is that all? I asked. She hesitated. Looked at me like she was trying to solve a puzzle. Tessa, did you have any knowledge of the compliance issues that have come to light? I process financial reports, Marlene. I track expenditures and flag discrepancies. That's my job. Always has been. But the timing of what? An audit that was apparently overdue? Compliance concerns that should have been addressed months ago? I'm not sure what you're asking. She stared at me. Searching for something. A confession. A hint. Anything that would confirm what she clearly suspected. But I gave her nothing. Just the same neutral, professional expression I'd worn for 9 years. No, she finally said. That's all. Thank you, Tessa. I stood. Smoothed my skirt. If there's nothing else, I have vendor reconciliations to finish. Of course. I walked back to my desk. Sat down. Let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. 3 hours later, I submitted my resignation letter. Printed. Signed. Dated. 2 weeks' notice, professional and courteous. After careful consideration, I have decided to pursue other opportunities. I appreciate the experience I've gained at Meridian Solutions and will ensure a smooth transition of my responsibilities. Standard. Professional. Utterly unremarkable. I delivered it to HR in person. Marlene read it twice. Tessa, you don't have to do this. We've corrected the situation. We value your contributions. I appreciate that. But my decision is final. Can I ask why? I smiled. Small. Polite. Empty. Like I said. Other opportunities. She couldn't argue. Couldn't push. Because pushing would mean acknowledging everything that had happened, and acknowledgement would mean legal liability. I understand. We'll process this right away. The next 2 weeks were surreal. The investigation continued. More auditors. More lawyers. Preston never came back. Rumor was he'd hired his own legal team. Another rumor said his father was trying to quietly settle before things went public. Too late for that. On day 8 of my notice period, one of those financial journalists published the story. Consulting firm under investigation for fraud and retaliation. The article was detailed. Devastating. Cited anonymous internal documents and whistleblower allegations that painted a picture of systematic abuse. By day 10, the board had announced an independent review of financial practices and corporate governance. By day 12, Marlene had been reassigned to a non-management role pending review. My last day was quiet. A few people brought cards. Someone organized a small cake in the break room with "Good luck Tessa" written in pink frosting. I smiled. Thanked everyone. Packed my personal items into a single cardboard box, a plant, a photo frame, my coffee mug with "But first, coffee" printed on it. As I walked to my car for the last time, I passed the main conference room. Through the glass walls, I could see the board and emergency session. Lawyers everywhere. Stacks of documents. Grim faces. The CFO looked like he'd aged a decade. I put my box in the trunk. Sat in the driver's seat. Turned on the car. And I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt tired. And clear. And free. 3 weeks later, I started at a competitor firm. Same industry. Better company. 40% salary increase. A title that actually reflected my skills, Senior Financial Compliance Officer. My own office. A boss who said, "I want you here specifically because you don't let things slide." 4 months after that, Preston's case went to settlement. The details were sealed, but the company paid $2.3 million in fines and restitution. Preston was barred from holding any executive position at a publicly traded company for 10 years. His father quietly sold his shares and resigned from the board. Marlene left the industry entirely. Last I heard, she was selling real estate in Florida. And me? I'm still here. Still doing the work. Still asking the questions. Still refusing to shrink. But now, when I ask those questions, people listen. When I flag something, people investigate. When I speak in meetings, people take notes. Because here's what they don't tell you about revenge, especially the kind women enact: it's not loud. It's not dramatic. It doesn't happen in a single satisfying confrontation where you deliver the perfect speech and everyone claps. It's quiet. It's strategic. It's about knowing your worth, documenting the injustice, and choosing the exact right moment to let the truth speak for itself. Preston thought he could humiliate me. Thought he could cut my pay and force me to apologize for having standards. Thought I'd either quit quietly or break down publicly. He never considered the third option, that I'd been watching him the whole time. That every mistake he made, every ethical line he crossed, every dollar he stole, I was documenting it all. He underestimated me because I'm a woman. Because I'm middle-aged. Because I didn't have a fancy MBA or a trust fund or a daddy on the board. He saw me as an obstacle to remove, not a threat to manage. That was his mistake. And that's the lesson I want every woman listening to take away from this: when they underestimate you, let them. When they dismiss you, document them. When they try to break you, build your case. And when the moment is right, when they're so convinced of their own invincibility that they've stopped paying attention, that's when you strike. Not with emotion. Not with drama. With evidence. With precision. With the kind of cold, calculated strategy that they'll never see coming because they never believed you were capable of it in the first place. My name is Tessa. I let HR cut my pay and demand I apologize for doing my job with integrity. And then I exposed them so thoroughly they're still cleaning up the damage. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I didn't play by their rules. I documented everything. I waited for the right moment. I executed perfectly. And I won. You can too.